kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Isco an Götze.
Sancho on his own. He's got past his man. Jadon Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce out. Another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond
Jetzt kommt
compare.
das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Isco an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal! Ansgar Knauf scores his first Bundesliga goal.
Und weiß nicht, wer erwartet. Ich glaube, es war heute. Ich weiß es nicht.
Borussia Dortmund take a step towards the Champions League.
Reus kommt dann mit dem Schuss in die Mitte. Santana oder Schieber.
Welcome back to Dortmund Dispatch. Today I'm joined by Pedro and Brian. How are you guys doing this weekend?
I'm doing good, just chilling. I was pretty happy yesterday. Of course, Dortmund won 4-0, and also Spurs won 4-0 against City. But that's no surprise. We always beat City. It doesn't matter how well they are. Spurs are always going to beat City. But besides that, the weekend was pretty nice, pretty chill. But I'm crazy finally to talk about a win.
My weekend was the opposite of chill, but that's fine. Sport-wise, everything is going well. Obviously, Pedro already alluded to us getting that 4-0 win. I actually had no idea that, I know this is an aside, but you mentioned that Spurs always beat City. I wasn't aware of that. Do they have like a streak going or something like that?
Nah, that's
Well, no,
a
because
thing.
there was the year Arsenal almost won the league, and that time they lost.
Ah,
But
okay.
aside from that, it's a big
No,
thing.
but usually it doesn't matter how good City are. They always find a way to lose against Tottenham. It's amazing. It doesn't matter how bad Tottenham is and how well City's doing. We always find a way to bounce a win against them. It's amazing.
Well, two wins for you in a week, so that's good. But yeah, on our end, obviously, we have the 4-0 to talk about, so I'm happy to be talking about a win as well. It's been a long time coming, so it's gonna be good.
Well, yeah, let's get into the result. So obviously, Dortmund won 4-0. What did you guys kind of think about the match?
I thought it was one of the most solid matches I watched from Dortmund in this season. Of course, I think it's too early to get into a hype train or anything about this match. And considering, of course, what happened before that, we were pretty in a difficult state at the club. But it was a really important win. Of course, we usually it's good for Dortmund always to bounce back against Freiburg, and especially at home. But at the same time, I don't know. I think it's way too early to get into the hype train. But I think it's some tactical changes. I thought they were interesting. But maybe I think we're just gonna go dive a little bit deeper on that later. But what about you, Ryan?
I mean, yeah, honestly, I watched the game a little bit later than you guys because I came back a little bit later yesterday, so I watched the replay. But from what I could see, I mean, it was a very good game, very well played. I mean, I know we were talking in the chat with regards to the post. I forget who it was, which Freiburg player that shot the ball, if it was like Hoeffler or somebody. Yeah, I mean, that was the one really scary moment that Freiburg had against us. And I think it's massive that it didn't go in because we've seen Dortmund, score, a goal and then the team equalizes quickly thereafter and then we're in trouble. So, I mean, that post saving us, I think, was a big save for us and definitely kept us in the game and allowed us to build on that lead. But overall, I think it was a very fun performance from the team. Passing was very crisp. So overall, I think it was very much an improved performance. Excuse me.
Yeah, aside from the triple chance, it was like very, very good defensively from Borussia Dortmund, and that's back-to-back home matches. We've now seen that from Dortmund, where it was against the advertising firm and now Freiburg, which are both European level sides. And we really allowed nothing against the advertisers, but in this match we did allow that one chance. It looks a little bit worse on our XG allowed because of it being a triple chance. Post-shot XG on the first shot was about 0.86, but like the total of the three shots in XG was like 0.6, and they only got like 0.82. So you can really look at this and be like, wow, so like if Kobel's like parry doesn't fall for like their player, you're looking at conceding like about 0.5 xg, and to concede like 0.5 or less xg against two European level sides at home or away would be extremely impressive. Obviously at home, because away is another story. But for me, like one of the things I was thinking when I watched this match is, um, we only really created the one big chance, and we put it away obviously in the first 10 minutes through Maxi Bayer, which kind of gives you a bit of an exemption for the game state not to create that second big chance. It was only three chances above average, uh, above the average chance in terms of quality, despite having 19 shots, which is not great, especially when you're playing against 10 men for half an hour. But when that first goal went in, my thought was like, this is great. I'm going to enjoy a fun win today, but it's at home. And like, there's a part of me that like doesn't not care, but doesn't believe in what I'm seeing as a sustainable product until I see an away result that doesn't have to look this fun or this convincing, but it has to like approximate it to some degree. Because like it wasn't like we created a ton of chances, like we scored a lot of goals, but you have the Brandt free kick and Mecha shot from distance, um which aren't like the most sustainable ways of scoring goals. But like, to me it was a very fun watch, but it wasn't something that's like getting me positive.
I think it's also relates to what I was saying about the hype train. I think it's way too early for that, but I saw some interesting patterns in this match that I thought were pretty interesting. I thought first the formation. We played basically win possession in a 2-3-5, and really like the positioning of the midfield with the three guys always in line with each other and exchanging positions. So against Freiburg's, when usually they defend in a back five and they usually have two guys in the midfield, we always outnumber them. So in that sense, I think that was really positive for us to make the game flow in our way and keep control of the possession. That was really interesting, and I really like the aspect of having that line of five players up front. And sometimes you would see Ben Sebaini playing as a left wing back, but sometimes he would drift inside and Jamie would be the flanker. And that was exactly how it happened in the first goal. And we, by the way, absolutely amazing pass by Rami Ben Sebaini, assist to Maxi Bayer. And I think also another thing that really got my attention in this match was the our pressing system. I think this was one of the best pressing matches from Borussia Dortmund this season. Not only because we didn't press like crazy with no pattern, just for the hunger to go for the ball, but it was more controlled and it was more a plan because basically we didn't press super high. We pressed high sometimes, but our middle block was really well established when we pressed. So even when they managed to go lead their defense a little bit and go to the right back or the left back, they had no options in the middle. And basically Dortmund just left their center backs. Okay, you guys can have the ball. You guys can try to play. We're not gonna give you options over here in the midfield. And that was pretty positive. And some of the good things I saw from this match, of course, I think it's way too early and we were coming from a bad streak. But it's already good that I'm seeing Sahin trying to find different solutions, and it worked pretty well in this match. And I think that by their chance specifically, I think was mainly created because Kobel, I mean, he was being solid in possession until that point, and he made a completely childish mistake, if I could put that in words. But and then the defense was completely helpless. Sorry, my English is failing me, but you get what I'm saying.
It's okay. Let me pick up and kind of talk about some of like the shape adjustments and how they worked in and out of possession. And so essentially we've talked about all year, like in a double pivot, we don't necessarily have a lot of guys that are playing the 8 role that can play the 8 role. So you're looking at Sabitzer doesn't have the defensive work to do it. Brandt doesn't have the defensive work to do it. To play an 8-8 role out of a double pivot. Gross doesn't really have like the ability to do it. But when you play like a 4-3-3 rather than the 4-2-3-1, um, which this year we haven't even gotten the benefit of Brant as like a goal and assist threat to the same extent. Uh, by dropping him a bit deeper, you allow a bit more coverage when the eight gets forward because the other eight is has a deeper mentality essentially, or like the mentality to play a bit deeper, which allows for you to still have that coverage and have a better rest defense. Whereas before, when you're playing Sabitzer in that double pivot and he decides to get forward, Brant is like nowhere to be seen in terms of a defensive position when we have the ball. And so now by playing him and Sabitzer, um, both as eights, you essentially have like when one is forward, the other is covering. And this is probably why we were a little bit weaker creatively because you don't have that same freedom, but it will help and be better in some respects. Just in terms of like defensively, we're not conceding really much of anything in this match. And I think also like going from like anyone other than Bayer at the nine, I think really is a different type of pressing as well. Because like there's some of the times where it's like we're winning the ball back because Bayer just like picks a midfielder's pocket. And he had 4 tackles and interceptions in this game. And like a lot of the tape Freiburg would have been watching would have been with Sarah Guirassy, who like works hard but is not an excellent presser in the way that Maxi Bayer is, and I think that's a big part of it as well because there's just so many times that the midfielders are just getting caught in possession really that aren't really down to tactics. It's just like Maxi Bayer, instead of standing in between the lines, is just like, oh, he's got his back turned. He hasn't checked me once. I'm just gonna go win the ball back because I'm very fast, and he also very like works very hard. So I think that's a bit of it, but there is also like that idea of playing like the 2 8s and not having Brant consistently push into the wing that really allowed us to be more compact against the ball and like definitely hurt our creative abilities. Like I said, we had 3 shots in this game that were league average chance or better, which is like 0.11 xg. I would argue that like the Jamie Bino Gittins goal, which was 0.05, for him, like that is the shot he takes like probably 200 times a day in training or like on his own, and has probably done that like has probably, even when he was a kid, was probably doing like 500 of those a day, whereas now he's training a bit harder and he's not allowed to like go and train by himself for 3 hours. But like that is a shot this guy has done more than almost anyone else on the planet. And you can really look like the sample size would be too small to like confirm this, but I feel very confident that he's very above average at finishing from that little cut in shot right by the 6 yard box from that left wing.
And speaking, I guess, of the midfield structure composition, I guess, as well, and this is something I believe you shared on our Twitter, Eli. You had Brant coming out and basically talking about how having Felix Nmecha and how he's been playing kind of really help in terms of the cover. And it also obviously showed that, there's a certain player that may or may not be a weakness. I'll let you get into that if you want to talk about that. But because they have that cover and how, I guess, Nmecha has been playing, it's allowed them to have a little bit less of that responsibility. And I guess that does help them in their play, because at the end of the day, Brant isn't the typical player that is going to be defending and all that. He's not a massively defensive player. So having that sort of player in form right now allows them to be a bit freer, and I think that does help the midfield because it allows each and every single person to kind of work to their strengths and do things that they do well versus having to pick up the slack for someone who technically should be doing the defensive work. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be doing defensive work because everyone on the pitch should be defending, but you get what I'm saying in terms of having that sort of defensive like fulcrum there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of it is not just down to the defending aspect, but it's also like happens once he pokes the ball away and like how agile he is to get to that, because Emre Can is very quick in straight lines. He's not the most agile player. So if you look at like the AC Milan match at home last year, that's a big one where you can see his lack of agility hurts the team. I think there's a very specific role that Emre Can can play, but we don't have the fullbacks this season that would allow us to play that system. So if you look at like his best season for Borussia Dortmund, which was including this year 3 years ago, where he had Bellingham alongside him, who is an excellent progressor and could help him a lot with like the press resistance, progressing the ball, stuff like that. And then you also had the two fullbacks that season were Marius Wolf, who is really a winger and got forced to play there, and Rafael Guerrero. Guerrero could invert, Guerrero could help progress the ball, and Guerrero was very creative going forward, which allowed Emre Can to essentially have very little to no responsibility on the ball. And when he was getting the ball, it's dropping in between the center backs. I think he was still a problem that season because, like any player who is not capable of being press resistant and progressing the ball is a liability in a possession side, which we were that season. So like it still was not without problems, but like that system essentially gets the most out of him because you have two very, very attacking wing backs, and you have him essentially playing as a six in several phases of the game, but also like dropping into like the back line many times to hide his weaknesses when you want to progress the ball to allow like Schlotterbeck to have a little bit more freedom. Hummels and Sula almost split time 1-1 that season, and both of them were excellent progressing the ball, stuff like that. And you still see that when he plays, but now when you're having that fulcrum there, like Mecha's press resistance in terms of like his dribbling really allows those 2 8s to stay a little bit higher so they could sit right in behind that like first line of press. And that was like one of the ways like we kept finding like the free man is because like we essentially keep Ryerson deeper instead of having that deeper player in the midfield, and then they have to stay on the 6 in the midfield, and as soon as you get the ball wide, your fullbacks are very easily able to find your 8s in behind their midfield line, and that was how we kept breaking the press, and that's something that Mecha kind of allows you to do because he's able to kind of go in between the like our defensive line and our midfield line and kind of like mop up the danger in that area. And he's able to cover a lot more ground than Emre Can in that way. And also like when he's poking the ball free, in this match especially, it was very apparent, but he's just able to get to the ball once he pokes it away and like control it a bit more than a guy that doesn't necessarily have the most he doesn't have like he's not the most agile, and he's not like the best at dribbling the ball, and that those are qualities that Nemecha has always had. Like I've been very critical of him, but I always said like he is a good ball carrier, and one of the things being a good ball carrier does is really allow you to kind of like just buy time, and buying time is so important in the midfield in terms of like allowing your 8s to find space and allowing your 8s to like stay higher up the pitch because they don't have to support you immediately, whereas when Emre Can's in that 6 role, he's often struggled defensively this season. His defensive numbers are way down. I don't think he's fallen off a physical cliff. I think it's just that he's not being asked to defend in the same way he was in the last 2 years in that kind of halfback position where he's half a defensive midfielder and half a center back. And then again, like I'm talking about, like that his need to play like 1-2 touch passes, which he's like sideways backwards, is very, very secure at. Like that also requires so much more work from all the players around him. So I 100% agree with Pedro. Like, like that quote isn't directly saying anything about Emre Can, but if you're looking at the tactical implications around it, it speaks 1,000 words.
True. And it's I don't want to talk too bad about Emre Can because he was not even playing. Of course, due to his past mistake in the last game, he has the 2 game suspension. He's also out against Bayern Munich. So in that sense, it's a good opportunity for us to see if Mecha is the guy for the job because we already are having question marks regarding Emre Can, and having those 2 game streak for Mecha to actually prove himself against like above half of the table adversaries. I think it's really important, and it's not only his agility but his press resistance, of course, but his stature and physicality are really important in the midfield, and that's something that I also think Emre Can doesn't have as much. And I think it's also about the scheme, as you guys were saying. He was not expected to do much as the hybrid 6 center back from the who stays in the middle in the back 3. But especially when, as Eli was saying, when Bellingham and Guerrero left, he was given more responsibility than most of the players in the midfield to progress the ball, and he's not that guy, unfortunately. I think, of course, we had other weapons like Sabitzer to fit in there right after the transfer window, but Sabitzer is also not that good at a progressor. I also prefer Sabitzer closer to the goal to getting the shooting opportunities. And that's also another good thing about Mecha. He's also a goal-threatening opportunity, not only with his headers in set pieces, but also with his shooting ability. He already scored with Germany during the midweek, during the international break, and then he scored in the next game for Dortmund. So really good to see him doing different roles and having different functions within the 6 kind of participation. And honestly, I wanted to ask you guys about his goal because I thought the keeper, I didn't think it was a direct flop, but I thought he just went to the other side a little earlier so he couldn't recover because that shooting was not right on the angle, was really hard to reach, but I felt the keeper reacted way too early. Do you guys think was his mistake or?
Well, Atebolu let in 7 more goals than expected last season. And currently this season, coming into this match, he was a bit above average, but I've already talked about like how small the sample size is for goalies, and like this match took him back to being slightly negative. I expect like a good season for Atebolu would be like to finish -3 or something. Because right now he's like minus -0.02 per match. Last season he was at like minus -0.2 something, which is terrible. In terms of post shot XG, like he's not a good shot stopper. He's still very young, so I understand why Freiburg is just insistent upon developing him, and he could become very good. But right now he's not. I think the branch shot as well, like it's a little bit towards the middle of the goal, and like even like the Bayer chance, like it's a .4 xG chance, it's .36 on post shot xG, where like you can't discredit Bayer because he scored, like he saw something that the goalie wasn't covering, but the goalie also wasn't covering that spot. So like honestly, even like the Jamie Gittins one, like it's a brilliant finish. He puts the ball in the one spot on the far post where he could possibly score, but like I'm not asking for him to make all the saves, but I'm asking like if I was a Freiburg fan, I'd be asking for at least 2 or 3.
I was just about to say I'm not asking him to make any saves against us. He can miss all of them for all I care. Yeah, I mean you kind of already hit the nail on the head, Eli, in terms of like talking about like probability of those shots even going in. Like yeah, I mean the Nemecha's thing was a pot shot, right? No one would have expected
.05 like post shot xG and
Yeah.
.03 like I think it was
So
in terms of just xG.
yeah, so you're looking at chances that aren't likely to go in. I mean, maybe for the Nemecha shot because he is shooting from so far out, you could kind of argue that he was a little unsighted. So maybe he thought it was going one way, and then like his defenders were blocking him, and then he realizes too late that it's going the other way, and that kind of plays into what you were saying, Pedro. But yeah, I mean, Brandt's shot, like it was so funny because the commentators right before he shoots is like, oh, he hasn't really scored in the Bundesliga, or well, has scored in a while in the Bundesliga or something like that. And then just as they're saying that, the ball is like floating into the net. So, I mean, we've seen these things get saved. We've seen them not. At the end of the day, we can just say the guy just had a bad game. I mean, the stats you mentioned obviously show he has a propensity for this kind of stuff, but also what you said is, he's young. So there's time for him to develop. But that's not our issue, thankfully. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think he'll be fine. That's Freiburg's, like, fans' worry is kind of like, will he ever? But for us, this was a very pleasurable game to watch. But again, like I said, some of the chance creation stuff for us is still kind of on the forefront a bit. But do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like, why were we not creating chances? Was it down to like having the lead, or what was that?
I have a small hinge on why is that. I think especially in the flanks, and I think it's even not fair to Jamie Gittens, but in my opinion, except from the goal, I didn't think he was as sharp and as confident in the other matches compared to this one. He didn't seem himself fully, except from the goal. So especially when he was having those one-on-ones and the opportunity to go to the byline and getting those low crosses, I think we should have capitalized more on that, especially having the chance creation inside the box. You usually have a higher XG, and in that sense, it wasn't that effective. But he scored a beautiful goal. He's one of our most exciting players to watch. So he still needs to start, but I'm still. I think I created too much expectations with him with the beginning of the season, and now I expect him to do it every game, which is not going to happen. But it's still good to have him doing that. And Malling was a little bit underwhelming for me as well, on the other flank, even though sometimes when he drifted
We
inside
don't
and
need to talk about that too much. I don't want to give
yeah,
anything
yeah,
away.
yeah,
I might talk about it in a different segment of the show. Um,
makes sense,
but
yeah. But it's all part of the same principle of not having our wingers not having that good that effectiveness, especially in those one-on-ones. And I think that's what is one of the main factors. But I was really excited with the midfield. I think we managed to possess the ball a lot. I think we just needed to find the right opportunities and finding the right spaces. I think Sabitzer had a great match, and I think it's a long time I haven't seen him playing that well. But I think it's more due to the
Because he wasn't playing on
flankers.
the wing.
Yeah, I think Sahin finally realized that, but yeah, it took him way too long.
Yeah. I guess, well, what I was going to bring up, I guess, and this is going to be a little weird to say because we did score 4 goals in this game, but considering the nature of the goals, I really don't think Freiburg's defense really allowed that much aside from those shots. And I think that comes down to coming into the game, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I'm happy to be fact checked on this, but I'm pretty sure they were one of the top 3 or 4 defenses in the league coming into this game. So considering they already had a pretty like good defensive record, or they're relatively up there, I mean, it's not super shocking that, we didn't create all that much and that a lot of, well, our goals basically came from, freak chances and like, opportunities we didn't necessarily expect to get. They didn't really come from open play. So,
I'm here with the fact check, and even after this match, uh, Freiburg is allowing less than 1 xG against per match. They've
there you
allowed
go.
the second fewest expected goals in the league, behind only Bayern, and the gap between them and third, which is Union Berlin, is 1.9. So like that's a very big difference across 11 games. Their defense is excellent. Shout out to the former Dortmund player Matthias Ginter back there. So 100%, like we can give some credit to the Freiburg defense as well, but I'm always trying to see more. Uh, and I did say like a big part of it is game state because we created one big chance and it's in the first 10 minutes. So we didn't necessarily need to take big risks to kind of create chances. And that could also be a big part of it. That's why I always knock single game XG as like a big decisive stat, is because like that goal, like Dortmund has no incentive to attack, and then when you get a second, third, and fourth from like not having to risk a ton, it's like just because you didn't have to risk much. But let's move on to our Actually, no. One thing before we move on to our star and dud of the week. Uh, what were your guys' thoughts on the substitutions? Because personally, I wanted to see a little bit earlier, like 13 minutes for Reyna and Duranville back from injuries. I think that's fine because always better safe than sorry. But I think like Cole Campbell potentially with a midweek game could have gotten 30 minutes here, especially like up a man.
No, yeah, Eli, that's great that you brought that up. I actually forgot about that, but I had that on my notes, and I expected more from substitutions from Sahin, especially earlier, especially because of the context of this match. I mean, you're beating your adversary 4-0 or 3-0 at some point in the match. They had, I think, was around the free kick that the other guy was sent out. So one player more in the pitch. That was the opportunity to play your young guys in. Sahin was all about saying, "Oh, I don't want to put my youngsters in those kind of situations where they have to be key players when we are having an injury crisis." But when you have the opposite of that, you're in a scenario where you have one more player on the pitch, you're beating your adversary by a large margin. So it's really hard for them to come back in the match, especially with one player being sent out. So in that sense, that's the perfect scenario for the youngsters to get in the match with no pressure. And I was expecting more of that, and especially earlier. I really wanted to see Cole Campbell. I mean, it could have been easy, just put Duranville on the left and then Cole Campbell on the right. Kabar also got some minutes as well. That's fine. Also get some deserved resting time for Ryerson, but I'm expecting a little bit more from Sahin. Especially, I remember I didn't even watch that last part of the match. I needed to leave because I needed to hang out with my friends. So I left right around when Jamie Gittens scored the fourth goal. And I was like, okay, I'm just turning the TV off and leaving. And I was expecting more. Then when I watched the last 15 minutes after that, I don't know. I just wanted to see more young guys' energy over there.
No, and Pedro, I think you touch on an important point too. You mentioned the injury crisis. I mean, you would think that we would have learned over the course of the last however long, not if even if we're talking about like our years and years of history of injury crises, right? That rotation is necessary. Yes, we just had an international break, but a bunch of these players did play during the international break, so it's not like they were sitting and like not doing anything. Obviously, they spent some energy. They were probably still somewhat tired from that as well. So it would have been good to come out, give the younger players a little bit more time, simply because all these players that were in, or a good majority of them, have already been playing extensive minutes. So you want to give them the time to rest. And then, I mean, honestly, I would even think that in terms of like Reyna coming on, you give him a little bit more than the 13. I think that's fine. I understand, caution, obviously is something that we need to take into account. But maybe even like, the 20 minutes, I don't think that would have re-aggravated anything. And every single minute counts for these younger players or players that don't have as much of an opportunity, because that's more time to show what they're capable of and showing that they can actually be an active part of this team. So a player like Cole Campbell, I mean, we even saw in the little time that Julian Duranville had on the pitch, we saw what he could do. And we were talking about this in the chat. Just the one cross, they whizzed across the goal, and that almost resulted in an assist. He always does that. Every single game he plays, he takes the defender to the limit and then puts that ball in across. Well, why not give him a few more minutes to do that? Coming off an injury, obviously with Duranville, okay, maybe I retract that a little bit just because of his injury history and all of that. But I mean, yeah, there's no problem with giving them a couple more minutes, in my opinion.
I'm actually going to retract my previous statements. I think their development plan this week was just centered around getting them a bit more actually at the in the third tier with the second team, and I think that's kind of like the advantage of having two professional teams. Like Cole Campbell, often when he's been with the second team, has not started this season. I knew this week he scored with the second team. I think that's one of his first or second goal, I think, with the second team. But he got 60 minutes there. And then you have Kabar with 45 as well. So maybe they didn't want to give him a full 30 with the senior team because they wanted him to get like 60 with the second team. And you have to remember, like, a lot of these guys that we're talking about are quite literally children playing against grown men, and one injury now, which they are more likely to get playing against grown men, can set them back very long. So being responsible is good, but I was a bit worried seeing some of these guys out there for like 78 minutes time and time again. Cole Campbell also played with the US U20s, so not necessarily senior football, but I still believe he got 2 starts over there. So he was playing a lot of football during the international break, and he gets 60 minutes this weekend with a very well taken goal against Aue. I'm not even. Every time I attempt to pronounce the first word there, it's so bad for me. But that's, I believe, more goals than I think we only scored 1 against them in preseason. So yeah, like good for him. 3-1 win there. Shout out Julian Hetver real quick, because yet again, I say it time and time again, like that guy is 21 years old. He's averaging a goal every 78 minutes, a goal or assist every 78 minutes in the third tier. With the track record of the guys that have played for our second team, not renewing him is just quite frankly stupid, and not giving him a genuine first team opportunity. Like, I would essentially sign him to a 3-year deal this winter, and from January on, he would be a first team player for me. I don't need to see Daniel Mullen again. But we'll get more into that later, because to me, we're not winning the league. I don't see the point. Like he should be gone somewhere else this winter. But anyway, let's move on. Let's start with our star of the week. Let's have a bit of positivity back here. Brian, you're a very positive guy. Say something. Who is your star of the week?
I mean, do you gotta ask Maxi?
I mean, I know, but you can tell the people.
Yeah, I'll tell the people. Maximilian Bayer, again, scoring what is his second goal in the Bundesliga at this point. I think he's really starting to come into his own. Breaking duck against Leipzig was very important, clearly, for him. I don't expect him to score every week. That's not the point here, but start building that confidence, start getting those goal contributions in, and he's doing it. And I mean, just in terms of everything about that goal, from his movement to be able to break that line and then to be able to go in and score, the pace, everything about it, it was just, it just made me happy. And the guy playing football makes me happy. We were talking about this earlier too. He's just such a positive. He just loves to be there. He has so much energy. He's just happy on the pitch, and it's just a joy to watch him. So I'm very happy for him, and that's my star of the week.
Yeah, very fun to watch a guy just knock the ball past players. Like the touch to set up his goal was really incredible, and it's always fun to watch guys that both have that ability technically and are also exceptionally hardworking. Pedro, who is your star of the week?
Just first, I want to point out how funny it is that Brian has a love for Maxi Bayer, the same level that Eli has the love for guys like Adeyemi or Tom Rata. I think that's lovely. But quickly,
one of our fan club guys.
You're skipping my main.
And that's, I think, my star of the week.
I'll be talking about him in a moment, though.
Yeah, but I'm gonna go with Nico Schlotterbeck. I'm not sure if you're getting him. Sorry, but he was already on my list. Sorry, you should have gone first. But for me, Nico was perfect. I think his ball progression, his timing on aerial duels and ground duels as well was brilliant, and the way he progressed the ball and just was really dominant at that area. Besides that couple of shots they had on the Kobo mistake, they didn't do much, and especially because of Nico, how well he was playing. At some point, I was thinking about giving to Ben Sebaini, because he had a really solid first half, and especially with the assist. But then in the second half, he tried that shooting the ball, and he ended up hitting the other side of the pitch in a throw-in. And I'm not a good footballer, and I'm not even a left-footed, but even if I tried really hard, I don't think I would ever manage to do that. So when I saw that, I was like, nah, I'm just going to chill, not Ben Sebaini. But jokes aside, I think Nico was the most solid one from the bunch. So Nico Schlotterbeck is my star.
Yeah, age 24 is when center backs kind of start to get into their prime. It's a bit later than a lot of other players. You could even honestly say 25, 26 would be the start of a prime. So previously, Nico Schlotterbeck has been talked about as not the best in the air, and that's been the one weakness in his game. His aerial win his aerial win rate, the last 2 seasons was 64.5% and last season 58.6%, respectively. This season, not the smallest of sample size given it's almost 10 full 90s in the league, it is 81.3%. This is a guy who this season, there has not been one foot wrong he has placed in a match, with the one caveat being that there was a functional midfield. Like if he has been given a functional midfield this season, he hasn't put a foot wrong. And even when he hasn't had a functional midfield, his distribution feels like it's gotten even better. And this is a guy who has been incredible season on season with his distribution. And if you look at his progressive passes per 90 this season, he is at 9.18. We talked about how this is potentially the start of his prime. The last 2 seasons, 6.36, 5.85 respectively. So to go up to the 9.18 is just unreal. And his completion percentage has gone up pretty much every year of his career. It's gone up after he became a regular rotation player. It's gone up from 80.1, 80.2, 86.3, 88.8 last season, and now it's at 90.5 while he's progressing the ball even more. This guy is just quite frankly incredible. Whether it's with the ball at his feet, without the ball at his foot, he is the best left center back in the world. And the first thing Sebastian Kehl needs to do when he wakes up tomorrow morning is give him a 5-year contract, as long as he possibly can, because right now, Real Madrid are interested in a center back in the winter, apparently. And having this guy with only a couple, 2-3 years left on his contract is unacceptable. Give him whatever he wants. This is a breakout campaign so far. But this is a guy who's been very good and is now playing at another level. And this is the guy you want to build your team around. Guys like this as left-footed center backs. It could be generational. I'm not going to say it is yet, but this is starting to look like it. This is everything is pointing towards it being him becoming a generational talent very, very soon. But I'm really quickly going to say Rami Bensebaini, much hated. I still think that I'm kind of waiting for some of the dumb moments this year. They haven't happened yet. Historically they will. It'll be 2 to 3 games. It'll make you tear all your hair out. But so far he hasn't done any of that this year. And I was a guy that said Maatsen is not worth 35 mil for sure. He might not be worth 25 mil to a club like Dortmund. Because I said that the odds of Remy Bensebaini being not bad was very high. And so far this season he's been genuinely quite good and has really helped us this season. And historically has a pretty good fitness record. So we're going to need that. Get ready to play a lot of minutes. So yeah, let's move on. I'm going to go first with my dud of the week because I just went last and Pedro stole my guy. So I still mainly talked about him, but it's got to be Daniel Malen. I think one of the biggest reasons we didn't create chances in this match is because Daniel Malen had about 4 or 5 chances to get 1 or 2 big chances created, and every single ball was just terrible. People talk about decision making with Karim Adeyemi, and to me it's he creates chances. He turns bad chances into big chances sometimes, and sometimes he's obviously going to fail at doing that. But Daniel Malen is a guy that, he does not get his head up. So, there's a ball he puts across the box, and it goes, in between the back line and the goalie. But, that's the way I hit balls, is just, you know where the back line's going to be, you know where the goalie is, you try and hit it in between them, and he just hits it there but as hard as he can. it doesn't matter where the runners are. So like in this instance, he had Julian, like Bayer had dropped in to help him build up, and Brandt is the most advanced guy as like kind of attacking that 9 position late. And instead of just trying to poke it past the goalkeeper into the middle of the 6 yard box where Brandt's run is coming, he just hits it as hard as he can. And there's so many times like this. It's so hard to watch. This is a guy that's fired his agent 3 times, and like I can only say it so many times. Like the reason you're not getting offers from the clubs you want is because of your talent. You like if you're on the third agent, like it's not the agent. He he doesn't want to be here anymore. He's made that very clear. With these like moves, like yes, I'm reading into it, but like you don't fire your agent for like not negotiating a new contract with Borussia Dortmund for the 4th straight year. Like it's gotten to a problematic point. He clearly does not want to be here from that situation. And like he does not press, he cannot create, and when he is not given like the freedom to go and do whatever he wants in the box, which he had a bit more of last year, because Terzic was defending a bit deeper, the attackers didn't have to be involved as much in the defensive stages. Like he was allowed to be the one that just went up, did whatever he wanted, scored a lot of goals, and like that is something he can do. There are a lot of sides that I think he could help a lot more, but when he has to try and do like more winger stuff, and he has to try and create chances, and he has to press, he's just not going to do it. I don't think that the reason I said earlier in the show that I don't want to see him play again is because like in the Champions League, like yes, him as a substitute I like, because he's probably better than any of the other options we have because of that goal scoring ability. But in the league, we're not winning the league, and I don't think he's the difference. Like the gap between him and Julian Hetver, I don't think the gap is big enough to prevent us from getting top 4. And I think the odds of Julian Hetver helping us win a trophy next season, or in the like couple seasons after that, or being a significant sale, is a lot higher than Daniel Mullen like increasing his market value to whatever we want it to get increased to. I think it's a lot higher than him helping us win the Champions League this year, which is the only trophy we have a significant shot at this season. I don't think the league's fully gone, but we'd probably have to do the double over Bayern and get lucky somewhere else. Like, I just don't. I don't see like Daniel Mullen being a guy that is a part of the long-term project at this club. And by firing his agent, he clearly doesn't either. I've seen enough of it, and like part of it is like he's better than I think. Like I hate watching him more than like I don't believe in him as a talent, as a footballing talent. But to me, I want to see a guy who believes in the Dortmund project play for Dortmund. And he does not. So
it's very strong words, but then again, it is Eli, right? And we know his feelings about Holland. So, I'll keep mine short. For me, and I say this obviously being a massive Kobel fan, for me it's going to be Kobel simply because of that that mistake in playing out that we kind of talked about. Like yes, we kept a clean sheet, great. And it is harsh in me saying this, so I mean I guess I'm kind of going with him because we all need to pick one, right? But the one thing that I can say about that is, you know, we've seen that I guess kind of become a trend. I mean, we've seen this happen in other games before where him playing out or struggling with playing out is what I'm trying to say, has led to opportunities for the opposition, which has pinned us back and made us work twice as hard to either try and get parity in games or obviously trying to get all the points. So I do think because it's becoming a trend, it's something that I guess, you know, kind of has to be focused on, or something I guess that Kobel should be focusing on moving forward. I think he has it in his locker to get that out of his game. He's still fairly young, especially as far as keepers go, so he's only going to get better. Well, you make that face, but they do their prime is technically closer
Yeah,
to
but that's I
30.
think that
So
prime is more in shot stopping. Like I don't think he's going to become at 20 like he's about to turn 27. I don't think he's going to mature in terms of his passing game. Like he can
but
still
I think
get
it can
better as a
improve.
shot stopper. I don't think he can improve that much as a passer. I think at like the the technical ability with the ball at your feet, I think is something that we would have seen a bit more of um earlier. Like I don't think that's what's going to improve in his game.
Sure, but I still think that some of the mistakes, I guess, what I'm trying to say is the mistakes that have been made are fairly elementary, and I think that's something that you can work out. Like I'm not expecting him to become, a maestro at playing the ball out, but he can do better than what he's doing, and he can be a safer option for that. Is what I'm trying to say. Not expecting him to become one of the best distribution keepers out there, but I do expect it still to improve, and I do think through practice and putting some more time and effort into that, that's something that can improve. But yeah, like I said, keeping it short, I do think because it's become a little bit of a trend, we can kind of put him in this category for this week.
Yeah, he is averaging a career low short pass completion accuracy. Um but like it's so hard to like tell the pass length for goalies because a lot of their short passes are like it's hard to see goalies with short pass completion percentages that are like under 100%, honestly. There's nothing really to read into that. It's like 98%. But I don't know. It's like he saved one post shot XG in this match. I think like I'm not worried about Kobel. He's nowhere near
No,
the
not at
worst
all.
player in the 11. I don't think you
No,
are either. I think that it's just something we kind of need to get past because I think like yes, you could definitely get a better goalie with their feet, but the issue with it for me is that he's so big in the locker room and he is so talented as a shot stopper that selling him, I think, and even if you
that's a big
can
no. It's a
even
big no
if you
for me.
could like get better in terms of like the XG you concede by like these sloppy giveaways, um, being better than like the post shot XG he's saving you, I think there's a bigger issue in terms of like the repeated selling of top talents like Gregor Kobel, and I think that would just damage your locker room to such an extent that it's not worth it. Um,
Not no, not at all.
so yeah, I think there's not really a reason to do it. I don't think
No.
it's like I think it's just something you have to live with, and I think his shot stopping is fine. I think like he's been negative so far this season, but he got one of the four back already in this match, and I think he'll end up in a very good place at the end of the season. Pedro, who's your dud of the week?
No, yeah, just real quick. I think I agree with both you guys in regards to Mullen and Kobo. I think I'm more with Eli in terms of how well Kobo can improve in terms of his ball playing abilities. But at the same time, I think it's not worth it to sell him just because of that. He's such a great shot stopper that one thing balances the other out. So for me, it's okay. Let's keep him and go into my dud. I'm gonna bring a guy that I don't bring here for a while. But for me, Watska in the board meeting, he had some quotes that really made me a little bit angry. As I,
I'll let you read the quotes. That's a perfect segue, Pedro.
yeah, yeah, we're going to the next segment, but just want to read the full quote. I mean, it's way too long. I'm just gonna, I think, just go through the most important parts and try to be quick. Okay, so he said in the middle, Borussia Dortmund doesn't mean creating a shoe storm, but sticking together. I sometimes have the feeling that the solidarity has been replaced by impatience. Are we playing against relegation? We have just came out of the Champions League final, and a year before we were millimeters away from the Bundesliga title. We are financially more stable than most clubs. Nevertheless, you have the feeling that there is always unrest. Social media is merciless, and the media and we too let ourselves be carried away by it. But we as Borussia Dortmund cannot do that. Our strength has always been solidarity. Borussia Dortmund does not mean creating a shitstorm, but but sticking together, as he said before. We are not sugarcoating anything. We are second in all-time Bundesliga table. Wow, big deal. And second in the rankings of the last 5 years. We are currently 7th in the Champions League, and we are surrounded only by the word metropolises. Yeah, I don't think if that Google translation is right, but I think you get what he means. I mean, some of the parts of this, I mean, he says like we're millimeters away from the Bundesliga trophy. Like that's a big thing. Like bottling the league, it's like wow, bro, we were so good. Wow, nice. We need a shout out to the boys. Great almost trophy. Let's go to the next one. No, we are not satisfied, and even if the social media is sometimes merciless, I don't think we are. I think that he's really trying to sugarcoat it, because it's not like we are playing well, seeing something on the team, and not getting the results. I mean, I don't see the project in the past. I mean, of course, I'm not counting this match, but before, we are not seeing a clear improvement from the team. We are not seeing clear patterns. I saw him a little bit confused on what he wanted to do. So, I mean, we're not getting the results, and we're not seeing the team develop. I mean, what should we be excited about exactly all this? I mean, it's really doesn't make any sense in my mind. And he speaking with his lungs out, saying we are second in all time Bundesliga table. And that's the kind of like standard that you want to set for yourself, like second best. I don't want to be second best. I mean, of course, second best is not the same as being the last one, but I want to aim for first place. I mean, that's not really what we want to hear as Borussia Dortmund fans. And as usual, sometimes he should just shut up, just keep his mouth shut, and don't talk to the media, because he doesn't help. I mean, the situation of the club, it's not really ideal this season, but with these quotes, I mean, it's really not helping at all.
Yeah, I agree with Pedro. I think that if we were within, like last year, Bayer Leverkusen had worse underlying numbers than Bayern Munich, but it gets to the point where like there's a certain margin for error where essentially like if your XG difference is like +1 per 90 and Bayern's is plus 1.5, like you're beating almost every team very comfortably, and it's just gonna come down to like how good you are in the games that matter most against the best teams. And like if you look at the season where we lost the league on the last day, we were very lucky to be in that situation by every underlying metric. If you look at the Champions League run last year, like it's a lot of Gregor Kobel. It's a lot of it. It's a lot of goal line clearances. It's a lot of like, why are our defenders having to make 20 tackles and interceptions a game? Thank you, Mats Hummels. It's incredible to watch him clatter people and win the ball cleanly somehow. But it's not like a good team performance. It's not like the most entertaining attacking football at times. And it's not like a convincing display of Borussia Dortmund like winning. It's Borussia Dortmund fighting. And so to me, like a lot of the mentality stuff like really annoys me, because you clearly look at like the talent we have on the pitch, and their mentality of fighting and like winning against all odds. That is there for me. The difference is that the behind the scenes stuff is gotten more and more to like the FC Hollywood that was talked about at Bayern Munich like 10 years ago, and even still today. And like we've gotten more towards that with some of the stuff that was happening last winter around this time, with Terzic beefing with all his players, and with like some of the statements we're going to talk about like later, and with Emre Can yelling at fans, and just some of like the board policies just not necessarily being the most forward thinking, and like having this mentality of like it's all about financial stability, but like we are financially stable, and like we should there's a way to maintain that financial stability while still competing for trophies. Whereas like when Watzke kind of came in and he saved the club from financial instability, like the times were very different, and like that is no longer the time. That's no longer the times we live in, and that to me is kind of like the issue around a lot of these statements. But I'm gonna give Brian a chance to react fresh to the other quote we have Watzke making about the squad's health. So he said, "We should counteract when people say BVB, BVB is languishing in its own juice. We are so proud that our sports director and coach come from our own academy. Sebastian Kehl has been a Borussia Dortmund player for 23 years. The three of them have won everything. I believe that's referring to Lars Ricken and Nuri Sahin as well. Just to finish the quote, that's supposed to smell bad. That's Borussia Dortmund. Most clubs would like to have that smell every day. So what are your thoughts on that, Brian?
Well, they're mixed, right? I mean, I understand a club wanting to stick to their own identity and bring in people that understand the club at a fundamental level. That to me makes sense. And if we're talking about Ricken, for example, I mean, he did pretty damn well with the youth department and all that stuff. So that makes sense. And I guess I can see why he would be in the position that he'd be in. Kale, I think we've talked about on the pod as well. That's someone who hasn't necessarily fully been allowed to, really do everything that he wants to do. We've spoken about counteractment in the ways, I guess, that the club has, in one way, been like, yeah, we're super happy to have Kale, but his decisions haven't really fully been respected or agreed with. I mean, we had the whole deal with Edson Alvarez fall through, and I mean, that would have been a big player for us, in my opinion. I think a much better defensive midfielder than Chan, someone who could have come in and been an immediate improvement, but that was vetoed. And then you start thinking, well, okay, you put so much stock in these people, and yet when they come forward with ideas that might make sense, you don't trust them to implement them. So it's a little bit back and forth with that. And I mean, with the coach, I mean, we've spoken at length about Sahin, right? And the club have two choices here, in my opinion, and I'm going to continue to say this, and I'm going to stick to it. Either you continue with Sahin and you really do try and buy into this project, or when changing coaches, you bring in somebody who actually has the experience to do more than something that would be interim. And it seems like he's leaning towards the latter. And obviously, with the results that we've seen, there's been no lack of criticism there and no lack of skepticism, and it makes sense. And if you think about the options even Dortmund had going, or throughout last season, and I've been pretty vocal about what I'm about to say as well, in saying that honestly, and this might be controversial, I would have probably given up that second half run to the Champions League final if we would have gotten a solid option to replace Terzic in the winter. As exciting as that was, and I loved every minute of it, you put yourself in a position in the summer where the options were much smaller than in that time. You had an Oliver Glasner back then that you could have brought in, for just as an example. In going into the season now, I feel like there were less options that Dortmund would have wanted to bring in. So I mean, I know Eli has spoken about Graham Potter before. I mean, that is a viable option, but not an option that Dortmund are going to want to bring in because of the German speaking factor. So that's why we ended up with someone like Sahin. So it's like, I get it. I understand you want to keep that Dortmund identity, but it has to come within reason. And like I said, I guess right now we have either two choices. You either rip it out root and stem, or you do see it through now. And it seems like he's pointing towards the latter with this quote. So,
yeah, they certainly believe in their process over kind of anything, which to me, it's like not great. I don't think they're like soliciting feedback from statistics. I don't think they're soliciting enough feedback from the supporters, from the members. And to me, that's the biggest issue. But, like, there's only so much, like, I can say about, like, their process and how it is bad. Like, the club is doing well because of a current structure where there are only so many clubs that are allowed to financially compete. They've done a great job of putting us in a position to be one of those clubs. And like Vodka is single-handedly responsible for taking us from the brink of bankruptcy to now like where we are today because he brought in Klopp and he uh Klopp took us to the heights he took us at, and he had the right people in place in the sporting department to bring all the right players in. And like, I credit Watzka for that, and I'm very grateful to him for that because without that, like, the club would not be in this position today where it's not like necessarily too big to fail, but it kind of is because you're just Champions League year after year, which has allowed you to reach so many eyeballs, and now you have so many global fans, and the club is such a big brand that it's essentially on par with like AC Milan and Inter Milan now, where previously it maybe wasn't internationally, but now that's the situation. And so to me, like, yes, every city that we're competing with it is a lot bigger than Dortmund, and Dortmund's not very big, but there is more to it. And when you look at like the process and how they're very clearly not analyzing it from the outside at all or anything else, like it's not like sound decision making. But Brian, can I turn it over to you to read the other quotes we have from the membership meeting?
Yeah, so continuing, I guess, with the quotes, he did mention here the Rheinmetall deal, and he did end up saying, and I quote, "Believe me, I had sleepless nights." And Manuel Veth, I believe, had a story on this, and he talked about how BVB members voted to end the deal with the weapons manufacturer, which is obviously great news for us. And the vote isn't legally binding, as the contract with Rheinmetall was signed by the chair company and not the membership club. So that's important information to have as well, contextually. But still, it's an important directive from the members to the bosses. And I mean, if we're just going to be frank about this, Pedro, I don't, obviously you'll give your take in a moment, but I've obviously been against this from the get-go. I don't think, we're talking about a blood sport here. I don't think we should have blood money involved in any way, shape, and form with the club. So the fact that we had this deal in the first place was highly problematic for someone like myself, and it goes against the core values of the club as a whole. So to have that kind of be what it was obviously very disappointing. To know that it won't be renewed, which I do believe is kind of the context we can glean from this, is great to hear. It's just still a blemish on the club's reputation to even had it in the first place, personally speaking. So.
Yeah, I also had not a lot to add to that. I think you said everything, and it also talks to what Eli was talking before. This idea of Watzke, he has helped the club and he has saved the club from bankruptcy, but he seems like a little bit too attached to the past, and he's afraid to that all to happen again. So he doesn't spend the money wisely, especially in terms of signings at some points. And that's a thing I've said here in the past, and I'll say it again. Dortmund, it's not like we are poor. It's not like Dortmund doesn't have money. We poorly spend the money that we have. And not only talking about signings, but also on those decisions like that, because that's not the kind of image you want for your club, and you kind of lose a little bit of faith from the fan base, and people stop buying products from the club, maybe because of that. I mean, I'm not an example of that, but of course there's people that were hurt by this kind of partnership. So I think the decision, it's great, and that's something that should have never happened.
Right. And with this in particular, I was going to mention this in the section we were talking about, the initial part where he's like, well, why is everyone so upset? Why is everyone so disappointed? Well, the Rheinmetall deal is an exact, like, prime example of that. It's kind of like what you were saying, Pedro. It's decisions on and off the field that have, I guess, in a way, I don't want to say turn people off to the club, because obviously, still a fan and all of that. But I don't support this deal. This doesn't support my values in any way, shape, or form. So to have something like this, intertwined with a club like Dortmund, which is a big part of my life, is problematic. And yeah, I don't know. Like, it's just nice to see that it's being taken back now, and they've kind of like really thought about it. But yeah, I mean, it shouldn't have happened in the first place. And it's just another example of, when he says things like, well, why is everyone up in arms? It's like, do you really have to look that far?
Yeah, that wouldn't line up with the quote he gave where he said he was having sleepless nights before he decided to do it. But let's move on. We have a couple quick hits that we'll try and get through really quick because this has been a long show. Three quick topics. Let's start with former Dortmund striker Robert Lewandowski, almost signed for Manchester United in 2012. What are your thoughts on this? Personally, like, that's not what happened. I don't think it would have changed anything. It's just not worth talking about for me. Like, maybe if we sold him, like, we would have won a league and prevented Bayern from going 10, but we didn't. This is what happened. It's not worth dwelling on too much for me. You
Yeah,
guys?
me neither. I don't really like talking about Judas, so move on to the next topic for me.
I mean, yeah, I mean, 100%, like, in terms of, like, it's water under the bridge and, there's not much to speculation there. I do find it to be interesting that this story came about, and it does shed a bit more light in terms of, I guess, his relationship with the club, and I guess kind of, how he ended up leaving on a free, because I do think that people do look to that and say, well, the reason he did go to Bayern was because he left on a free and he could choose whoever he wanted to go to. And then there's also the story about, how he almost went to Chelsea, or rather, Mourinho wanted him while he was at Chelsea, while we were actually looking at Kevin De Bruyne. So it's like then, you have kind of a what if situation there. But I mean, yeah, water under the bridge. It's just kind of a little interesting little tidbit there. And I do think things might have altered a little bit had he left, because I don't know if they would have found someone for the 12-13 season to, replace his output specifically. So we might have not had that Champions League final, and that is a core memory for me. And I know I just said in an earlier section that I not that I would have been fine with not going to the Champions League final, but I would have been okay with risking not being there. But the 12-13 final for me had a very special place in my heart. So I mean, I'm glad they didn't sell him. So
Okay, so we've recently seen Joe Bellingham rumors go from the Sun to some of our most reliable German reporters. I think the likes of like Plettenberg has now reported it. Uh, Honestly, like no one is giving me credit, but I did propose him in our How to Fix Borussia Dortmund half joking last spring. So, what are your guys' thoughts on Joe Bellingham? Do you like the idea of him joining? Do you think he'd break into the starting 11 anytime soon?
I think it's an interesting option. I think he plays more as an eight, and he also played at a false nine for Sunderland. And of course, they're leading the championship at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. So, and I think it's a good option. Keep it in the family, not in the wrong way, but you know what I mean. But I really like the idea, but I don't think he would break into starting 11 that soon. I think we have depth in those positions, and I think especially playing as an eight, he wouldn't fit right in. He might be play as a winger, maybe as soon as Malling leaves, and I'm not sure how long Adeyemi is going to take to come back, but I don't see him getting a starting 11 in any of those offensive positions. I don't think he can play as a six as much. So I think it's interesting signing depending on the price, but I don't think it's our priority right now. I think we should be looking to other positions to get more depth, especially in defensively.
it's interesting that you say that, because to my understanding, he played a lot more of a 10 position. So I mean, if we're seeing him play more in that position, I mean, you have a little bit more leeway, I think. But obviously, once again, that has to do with who we have operating there. I mean, we obviously have Brandt, but we do need a player, if it's not going to be Reina, which we don't know if it's still going to be or not at this point. And I think Reina is a big factor in whether signing a Joe Bellingham type player makes sense or not. But if in the hypothetical, right, and I'm not suggesting this is what we do as a club, but let's say Dortmund decide, you know what, Gio Reyna, we don't see you being able to be that backup player to Brandt, or see you having that future. You take him to the side, and I think if you're bringing in like a Joe Bellingham to kind of fill in, if hypothetically, if we're saying in that position, you have to get rid of Gio Reyna first. But right now, it seems like Reyna is kind of being reintegrated, and Shaheen is going to give him a chance. And he was saying earlier in the season that he's liked what he's seen from Gio Reyna. So to bring in Bellingham right now, like, yeah, there's the name recognition, there's the nostalgia, and then there's also the price tag of 25 million, which is like, if we're already being very, tight with our pockets and, where we want to spend. I think Pedro kind of mentioned this. There are other positions that we could be spending on. So it would be, I mean, but it's also a very on-brand Dortmund thing to do. It's like, we need a fullback, we need center back depth, we need another midfielder. Let's get an attacker. Like, I mean, like, that's kind of, our MO as a club. We love our attacking players. So you never know. Considering that, German media is kind of starting to pick up on it, there might be some fire behind all this smoke. But we'll have to wait and see. But that price tag is a little eye-watering at this point, especially considering the other needs that we have.
Yeah, the only way this happens for me is if they don't get promoted. If they get promoted, I mean, the price just goes up a million times. Like, I don't hate getting in a backup 10, because if you can go, like, the issue with Gio Reyna isn't this isn't an issue with Gio Reyna, but like the issue with having him as the backup 10 is next season he's going to be like 22, I believe. Like, he's 21 now. Like, he wants to be getting regular minutes. He wants to be starting. Whereas if you get Joe Bellingham, like, yes, he's starting, but he's starting in the second tier. He's not playing Champions League football. So, like, he's also like 18. He can come here, play 1 or 2 years before he becomes a starter, get still around like 1,500, 2,000 minutes. And the other, like, the actual issue with Gio Reyna being in that position, from the club perspective, rather than Gio Reyna's perspective, would be that Gio Reyna was just injured for an extensive period of time.
Yeah.
And, like, in this match, he subbed out for Brandt, or Reyna subbed in for Brandt. He got about 13 minutes. So Brandt played 86% of this match. That is still less than he has played as a percent of total minutes coming into this match, which was 91% of the available minutes. Like, he's on pace for about like 4,000 minutes this season, something absurd. And that's just not sustainable. And that's why you've seen a bit of a drop off in his numbers, along with Gross taking away some set pieces. Like, that explains a lot of it. So I think that's kind of like why Gio Reyna would want to move on, why the club might want to move on from Reyna. But again, like, if the wheels fall off for Sunderland, like, then maybe if you can get him in for like 10 to 15 and you get 10 to 15 for Reyna, then like, that's good business, because the buyback isn't active for another year on Rotha. You can get a nice high quality loan left back in and spend all your money on a 6, and that's really good squad building, because you upgrade one position, you bring in a backup for Ben Sebaini, and then you have like a prime age Tom Roth at left back for like 18 million. And that like fills your other hole. But I just don't see it happening unless, like, there's so many ifs, ands, or buts. Like, this is something that would 0% chance happen until the summer. But let's move on to our final topic, because it's been a long show. Nice are unlikely to trigger Yusufa Mukoko's release clause. Like, shock and horror, I'm so surprised. I literally said this in the summer. I was like, maybe Nice only agree this with the option to buy, and otherwise they wouldn't have done it, because this was never going to benefit Borussia Dortmund. Options to buy never benefit the club that's loaning the player out, because all it can do is, like, the option gets declined and now the value is set below what it was. So that's just the situation we kind of put ourselves in, because when he's been on the pitch, he's been great, and that's the story of his career. When he plays, he's great, but he's not getting the minutes he wants. He's not getting the minutes the club wants for him, and that's it's the same story again.
Yeah, I wrote about this earlier this past week too, and it's just really upsetting to see, because this is a talented player. Probably could have gotten minutes prior to the shakeup that we had at striker this season. And even with the players we have, I still think he probably could have gotten minutes, possibly even more minutes than what he's gotten so far with Nice. But what happened with him, deciding that he wanted to go, obviously a very joint situation with the fact that, he didn't get many minutes under Terzic, didn't see the perspective of getting more minutes here. Obviously, the club didn't show him that. With them being willing for him to leave, they didn't really care to show him that. So it would just really suck to see a player that could have been the standard bearer for the academy kind of end up just going for cut price. It's just bad business and just bad optics.
No, yeah, I agree with you guys. I don't think I have much to add. I think it's just wasted talent, and we keep saying that we wanted to see Mukoko as a direct substitution option for Aller and subsequently for Fulkrug as well. But he was eventually too behind in the pecking order that he couldn't find any other options here. Of course, I think the fact that he's not playing for Nice also relates to of course, not his lack of talent, but there's something that maybe it's not too. I don't know, maybe the Nice coach doesn't like him as much, or they want more of a physical profile. I don't know how the club situation, specifically with the tactics, are at the moment, but it doesn't speak much about Mokoko. He's a great talent, and I think we should have kept him, and especially not putting him in the situation that he needed to go extreme and just force his way out. And now we just were left in this kind of awkward position, which is not going to play at Nice next season. He's not having minutes. So if you really want to sell him next season, how are we supposed to do that if he doesn't play? The other clubs need to see him playing if they eventually want to have the option to buy him. And even if Dortmund wants to use him, he needs to be playing because he needs to develop. He's still really young. So in that sense, it's just an awkward situation all along, and I think it's also to blame from the director and how we just dealt with the situation. It's just a pity, honestly.
Yeah, it looks like they're starting nearly 6 foot Muhammad Ali Cho. I believe he's on loan from Sociedad, but they may have purchased. I wasn't aware of the transfer before. I'm looking it up now. But he's a lot bigger. He has 2 goals, no assists, 637 minutes in the league. He can play anywhere on the wings or through the middle, but it looks to me like he's their starting striker. And to me, I'm just not really. I don't get why Mukoko is not playing more when he has the same amount of goals, 1 assist, more XG, and like almost as much expected assists as Ali Cho in less than a third of the minutes. Like, that's the story of this guy's career, time and time again. Like, yes, being off the bench is boosting the numbers, but the numbers I mentioned there are overall. Like, he has 2.2 total at non-penalty XG compared to 1.5. But that would be the story of his career, to just not getting over a guy he is consistently outperforming, because Terzic really, really messed with his career, not playing him more when we had Tony Modeste, whether it was very, very late substitutions and like refusing to start him for so long. And then last year, when he quite literally ran Nicholas Fulkrug into the ground with about 4,000 minutes. He's been injured all this season, not to my surprise, not to the surprise of our regular listeners, and did not give Yusufa Mukoko minutes so he could get that 11th non-penalty goal out of Fulkrug last year. It really just goes to show that you should really never hate on a player for fighting their way out of a club, because that one manager can last a long time and really just hamper your development to such an extreme degree. That's not necessarily just for the player. It's very unfortunate it had to come to what his agent said, but that is what it was, and that's how it is, and it's just truly unfortunate. Hopefully he can get the minutes he has earned this season for Nice and turn it all around. But before we go, is there anything you guys want to plug? And if you stick around, we'll give a shout out to our top 5 fantasy Bundesliga guys in our league.
You can just catch me on Twitter, Brian_Straub94, and Blue Sky now as well, Brian Straub94. And Dortmund Dispatch is also on Blue Sky now as well, so follow us there. And yeah, we'll be posting more content there, so catch us on this new social media wave.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter, aka X, as at Del_Pedro23. I also want to give a quick shout out to the Brazilian podcast Corneta Dortmund, which is a Brazilian podcast about Dortmund that I participated in this past week. Really fun, different atmosphere. Or their editorial line is a little bit different. They are more into like just ranting all the way through the show. So it was a really therapeutical in a sense. So it was a really fun to just do something different. But if you're Brazilian and you're watching us and you have known from us through Corneta Dortmund, shout out to you. And we want to get even more international people, not only native English speakers, but also people from all over the world to talk about Borussia Dortmund. And see you guys next time.
Would be my nightmare for someone to learn English from listening to me. But anyway, you can follow us anywhere you get podcasts, Twitter, Instagram, Dortmund Dispatches everywhere. Follow us on YouTube. And the top 5 people in the Dortmund Dispatch Fantasy Bundesliga are Edward DC4, retaining his crown in first place, despite a bit of a slow week for him. Then SA Germans in second. Bayern Warsaw fans falling to third. Great job, guys. He had a terrible week, unlike Bayern, unfortunately. But we'll get 5 full Dortmund fans in our top 5. And the next would be Ryu Sanugi in fourth. He's hot on Warsaw fans in third. And the final in fifth is Pints of Bayer, who I also know. So I actually know 2 of the 5 people in our top 5. So just knowing me means you are more likely to make it into the higher end of the Dortmund Dispatch Fantasy Bundesliga. But thank you all for competing there, and have a good one.
Jetzt kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Isco an Götze.
Sancho on his own. He's got past his man. Jadon Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce out. Another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond
Jetzt kommt
compare.
das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Isco an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a